Okay, how's everybody doing out there? This is new for me because I'm usually not pointing. All right, are we there? Are we good? Okay. All right, so I'm doing this different this time. Hi, everybody. Welcome to my office. Yes, that's Bigfoot and a raccoon. Anyway, so we're going to let some people tick in here and we're going to. This is new because I usually use my phone. And right now, what I'm doing is using my computer just to talk to you so I can look at my notes and keep up to speed with that part of it. I'm going to wait till we get going here. We've got some metrics coming in. I'm trying to see how anybody on there yet watching. Can you guys just give me a test comment so I can see if that works? I can answer questions that way before we get going on here. Still not seeing anything pop up. Let me try something here real quick before we get started. Thanks for hanging in there with me, y'all. It's a different way of doing it. I'm just sending out some text to some folks that I think are watching right now, but I might just go back to the old way of doing this like I do the Creek Fire updates where I just okay, it says Jill wrote back yes, and people are commenting. I wish I could see it, you guys. Right now, I'm totally blind on that part. Oh, John's saying, oh no, that's someone else. Okay, I'm just going to dive in because you guys are all waiting here. I can't, for whatever reason, in my screen right now, I cannot see. I cannot see. Oh, there we go. Now I'm seeing it. Okay, all good. I see you guys now. Everybody's popping up. Okay, cool. So I'll be able to look at these. Thanks for bearing with me, by the way, everybody. I'll be able to look at these and try to keep up. All right, so here's the gist of what I took away. I think some of you guys that were on the call probably had the same reaction. Some of you maybe didn't have the same reaction. I had first heard about this proposed range of light monument a while ago. I read something in a magazine or picked it up on Facebook somewhere, and I thought, and I I wasn't fully focused on it. Didn't really read the whole thing. And then about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I heard about it again. I started asking around about it. I was like, is this thing going to happen? Like, what's going on with this? And then this woman, Deanna Wolf, she hosted this webinar today that some of us were able to log into and listen to. And so, so real quick, just to do a little background here, and I've got some notes I'm going to go through to help you guys out, help understand all this. But the, let's see, I'm looking for one more. There it is. Okay. So right now what the proposal is, and this is basically a dream of this one woman, Deanna Wolf, from what I can gather, is that she comes into the Sierra National Forest, has been for a while. She's a retired national park ranger. She is a yoga instructor and self-proclaimed environmentalist. And she started coming to the forest a long time ago, and according to her, doesn't like the way the Sierra National Forest looks or has been managed. And at the end of the day, what this comes down to, in my opinion, is this is another super left-wing environmental person who is anti-logging. They want to get logging out of the forest, which is why they want to change this to a monument, because if it's a monument, it's not going to be ran by the National Forest Service anymore. In their own words, the National Forest Service, the Forest Service, which is administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, is in the business of logging, period. I don't think anybody's maybe told this woman that logging, her counterparts pretty much killed logging back in the 80s. Just go to a town like North Fork pre-1980s when it was thriving, and now look at it, which it's a lot different than what it was. But what I gathered from listening to this woman was that her and her cronies she had on this panel, They believe there's just rampant logging going on in the Sierra National Forest. Specifically, they were really touchy about hazard tree logging, getting all the dead stuff out, or the trees that have been damaged in the creek fire. And so I think that's one of the drivers for this. But to give you a basic idea, an overview, what she's doing here. She has built a website called Unite the Parks, okay? And we'll put all this stuff up online if you haven't found it yet. And this is all her. This is all Deanna Wolf. And what Deanna Wolf has decided to do is say, I'm going to create this movement, as she calls it, Unite the Parks, and she wants to unite Yosemite National Park with Kings Sequoia National Parks by bridging that giant 1.4 million acres in the middle, known as the Sierra National Forest, into a national monument. So then all that land is basically administered to by one agency, which would be the Department of Interior and the National Park Service. Okay. So what does that mean? If she's successful, what's that look like? They've come up with the proposed name of Range of Light National Monument. That, if you don't know, is a term that the naturalist John Muir coined many years ago when he was running around our area up there discovering it and writing about it. He described the Sierra Nevada mountains as the range of light, meaning there was this, when the sun hit it just right at the end of the day, and we've all seen this if we've lived up there or traveled or recreated up there, there is a tremendous amount of beautiful light that comes off the Sierras when the sun hits it just so. And so that's what range of light refers to. This again would be a 1.4 million acre national monument. Now, how do we get to that? So this one woman wants to turn the Sierra National Forest into, and not by herself, but I mean, she's got plenty of followers and support. How do you do that? There's two ways to get to a national monument status. You go through Congress, and Congress votes on it and passes it through, and it becomes a bill that lands on the president's desk, and then they sign it. But in 1906, Congress approved an act called the Antiquities Act, and they specifically did that to help then President Teddy Roosevelt, who was a great outdoorsman, as we all know. Roosevelt wanted a way to quickly designate national monuments and national parks from just the desk of the president and not have to go through all the rigmarole of getting a bill passed through both chambers of Congress. And so that was passed in 1906, the Antiquities Act. In fact, the very first national monument ever created by Teddy Roosevelt was Devil's Tower in Wyoming, as I found out looking into this today. So there's two ways to do it: Congress or a presidential proclamation. In effect, an executive order, even though it's not technically what it is. But so the president, the sitting president right now, Joe Biden, and typically historically, presidents, just as they're on their way out, signing a bunch of proclamations is kind of one of the things they do. They pardon people and they create national monuments. And so Clinton did it in 2000. He created some national monuments right here in the Sequoia National Park area that added to that. Obama created quite a few national monuments when he left office. Now, Trump, when he came in after Obama, Trump raised a lot of eyebrows because he went in for the first time. A president went in, I think for the first time, and actually shrunk national monuments and tried to reverse the designation of national monuments. Specifically, that would have been Escalante Grand Staircase National Monument in Utah and Bears Ears National Monument, I think also in Utah. And Trump shrunk those dramatically because of the natural resources under those monuments, and specifically drilling for oil. And so he caught a lot of crap for that. And but it did set some precedent, even though political or government scholars argue even today that a president can reverse a monument once it's been made. That's going to be key here because it sounds like they're pushing this through to the president. And the president of the United States, if he signs this on his way out, the part I don't know yet, and we're all going to learn this together, is how fast does a national monument become a national monument after a leaving president designates it so, right? So before we answer that question, let's talk about, in her own webinar today, what Deanna Wolf is proposing, what she wants to see. She's the visionary of this crusade. What in her mind is the range of light national monument do? First and foremost, what jumped out to me was a complete end and banning to any logging, period, full stop. So no more rescue logging, no more hazard logging, no more nothing. Just done. Cut it out. Everybody out of there. That's her number one. That was number one on her list. Number two was closing most of the Forest Service four-wheel drive roads that we all know, use, and love in the Sierra National Forest, right? And so she put a map up showing all the current Forest Service roads. Many of them are the roads we all ride our off-highway vehicles on, our dirt bikes on, our street legal vehicles on, to get from one part of the forest to another or to explore on some fire road. This is what we do up there, right? Her proposal would eliminate most of those roads from being used. And not only eliminate the use of those roads, but part of her plan is to not leave those roads intact or to maintain them for fire break purposes. She didn't mention that. She instead said we would go in and reforest all those trees. As she, in her own words, those Forest Service roads are basically, to her, clear cuts. She used that terminology. I think those that were on the call would have heard that and had their jaw drop like mine dropped. So they would go to some great expense to then plant trees over all the roads and, probably push logs and just get everything kind of looking like it's one big forest again. That would also mean, but here's the thing that really got me about this woman, is how condescending she was on this webinar, speaking to all of us watching as if we were children that didn't understand how forests work. And that's typically the mindset with most of my experience with most environmentalists, elitists, and academia type people, is they think we're all stupid hilljacks that don't know how to play in the forest, when it's, in my opinion, those guys that don't know what they're doing. We've loved our forest to death thanks to environmentalists, as you can go and drive into them right now and see. But this is what we're dealing with here. So no OHV. This is important to note. If this goes through, you cannot take an off-highway vehicle into the monument. You can't take your General. You can't take your side-by-sides. You can't take a dirt bike. It has to be a street-legal vehicle, then to use only in a limited amount of roads. So that's going to piss a lot of people off. But that's a big part of, that's high on the list of what would happen if this national monument goes through. This was another part of the discussion that really shocked me. And this was a part of her pitch to all of us. A great benefit, this is my Deanna Wolf crazy person voice, a great benefit of this national monument would also be to alleviate pressure off of Yosemite National Park. Their plan would be to push 2.7 million people a year away, take them away from Yosemite and push them into this new national monument. Let that sink in for a second. There are a limited amount of ways you can access this forest, or what would be this monument. They're basically the Sierra Vista Scenic Byway, Bayshore Road, Mammoth Pool Road, Sky Ranch Road, that loop, and then the Kaiser Road and a few other roads. But basically, those are your main access points. So her great idea is to make this a monument so that 2.7 million people will now just go running around in the Sierra National Forest in places like Bayshore Meadows, in places like Jackass Meadows, in places like Mammoth Pool, in places like Mono Hot Springs, or the Kaiser Wilderness area. And so Dinky Creek, Dinky Lakes, Coyote Lakes, Bald Mountain, all that stuff. Well, you wouldn't be able to go four-wheel driving at Bald Mountain again either. And so that was a stunning one to me. And they were gleeful about it. If you were on the call, they were like, this is going to be great. We're going to send nearly 3 million people. And it's so contradictory, in my opinion, to what, we want to save the forest because it's not being managed properly. But we're going to send 3 million people into that very forest through a limited network of roads. There's very little services up there. It's insanity to me. And I'm sure they've thought it all out so dummies like me can play along, but that's what they're telling us right now. She made it very clear that this is a plan deeply supported by the Democratic Party and the DNC. She brought those up. That's not me bringing that up. She brought that up. This plan is 100% thumbs up from the Democratic Party, the DNC, and also said that the Democratic Party is the only party that cares about nature. Those were her words, by the way, in the webinar. We talked about 2.7 million people a year going in. After she spoke for a while, this other guy came on, Dr. Mark Bendick. And Bendick, he was the economic expert. So they ran all these studies. And that's another thing that's important to remember is they've done a lot of their homework on this thing. They've done all the environmental stuff. We'll get into the fire part of this in a minute. They've done the economic impact according to them. And when Dr. Bendick got up there and started to speak, his big takeaways for me were, he was talking about job creation. Again, they're talking to us like we're dummies. That's this whole meeting was this condescending, reassuring, reading me a bedtime story tonality of it's going to be great and we're going to create tons of jobs. And guess what? Those jobs that are right now taken by all the loggers up there, first of all, you don't know shit if you think there's just loggers running around all over the Sierra National Forest. You guys killed the logging industry in the 80s. Good job. You did it. You did your homework. These morons that are running around now trying to do this, they are literally under the impression that the Sierra National Forest is running rampant with guys and chainsaws. And when they make this monument a real thing, they're reassuring us by saying, all those logging jobs, they're not just going to go away. We need people with those skills. Those skills can be transferred. So a logger, now I'm quoting this. You can't make this shit up. A logger would become an environmental restoration expert. A logger would become and then went on to explain what that meant. That meant that a person that lost their job logging would then be hired by the government at a job that pays just the same, they were sure to say, to go back and do what I told you before, which is turning all the dirt fire roads into forest again. That's what they're talking about. It's like, well, loggers would just start planting trees everywhere. Put the chainsaws down and grab the bucket of seeds. That's what they're talking about. And they also said that the economic impact on this would be, I'm looking at my notes here, and I'm going to put websites up with all of this stuff that you guys can all look at, and I'm going to get to comments in a second over here. But I think it was like $600 million to the local economy, which I think is total bullshit. Again, it's all based on bad assumptions, all right? I mean, you have to keep in mind, Oakhurst, for instance, already has a community developed and designed around tourism to the south gate of Yosemite National Park. There's already hotels, there's already restaurants. you know, you're not going to build a whole lot more of that. There isn't space, there isn't room for it. In, let's say, using Oakhurst as an example, and I'm not saying that we don't want and shouldn't want to thrive in a tourism economy. I mean, the national parks are beautiful places, and we know Yosemite is highly impacted, and to a point to where now locals don't even go up there because it's a disaster, and you got to have a permit and a reservation to get in there. But these folks that are writing all this stuff up, this report for this Range of Light monument, none of them are from here. They don't live here. They're all San Francisco area codes, and so they're literally they're book people. They're just book smart people. I just don't think they actually get what's going on. Their claim is that there's only 10% of the Sierra National Forest left to log, because most of it's been burned up, and there's only 10% of the total 1.4 million acres of forest to actually log. And, you know, if you know anything, as I said before, we've already kind of killed logging here. We're doing very little of it even before the big fires have come through. And it's extremely regulated. The Forest Service gets sued every time they open up a block of logging by the Chad Hansons of the world and the Deanna Wolfs of the world. And so that's kind of where we're at. So they brought in the fire guy next, Dr. Joseph Wern. I think that's how you say his name, Werney or Wern. And he was another PhD in fire science and fire ecology and all of it. And seemed like a fine guy. His basic and boring dissertation to the group was basically in line with Chad Hansen of the John Muir Project, if you're familiar with that. If you're not, shameless plug, go watch Afterburn, the Creek Fire documentary on YouTube, and you'll see where I interviewed Chad for that. And if you're familiar with Chad, he is and Joseph was exactly the same way. I'll share some charts and graphs he put up on the screen, but the basic takeaway is when you log or thin a forest or do any kind of forest management to keep the forest clean, to get rid of the down and dead and the duff, and, you know, get the dead trees out and all that stuff. And when you do that, you make fire worse. And they believe it, and they've got the charts to prove it. And their basic the tenet, the main tenet of that belief system is that when you remove flammable things from the forest, like trees, you increase the ability of wind to move through the forest. This is Chad's main thing. So if I have a big grove of forest and I thin it, you're not going to stop fire. Fire's coming, whether it's man-made or it's lightning. And when it comes, it's going to move and carry through that thinned grove of trees faster because there's less trees to provide a wind block. That's basically their theory in a nutshell. They'll say that in 5 paragraphs and about twice as long as I just did, but that's what they're saying, that with a bunch of fancy words that I don't know how to use. And they're basically saying when you thin a forest, when fire does come and you can't stop it from coming, they're not going to limit that. They won't buy into the fact that thinning out the forest and keeping it clean helps mitigate the spread of fire. They're saying once a fire happens and the fire triangle is complete, temperature, oxygen, and fuel, all that's there, it'll carry through the forest. So he had papers and documents and charts to back all that up. And so that was his way of saying, hey, the monument's going to be great for fire because we're going to kick those dirty loggers out, and we're not going to do any forest management. We're going to let the forest go back to its natural state. And then when there's fires, it'll burn low intensity. It'll stay on the ground. We won't get crown fires. And fire is good for ecology and all of that. And a lot of that is truth. What's tricky about what these fire guys do, these fire ecologists that are anti-forest management or anti-logging, is that they do have good theories and concepts to back up parts of their position. And so it makes it complicated for the average person to sort of follow along with that. They base everything off of models. And even in his dissertation today, their modeling isn't complete because the modeling can't handle certain aspects of what happens in a large fire. And he even admitted that today. So it's like, I'm telling you one thing, but over here I'm telling you we don't really know. So that was that part. State Assemblyman Joaquin Arambula popped on for what I thought was 10 minutes of absolute uselessness. Typical for most of the things. Every time I see that guy on camera, it's just bleh, nothing comes out of his mouth that makes any sense or is useful at all. And this was another example of that. And so he got up and talked about how he grew up going to his cabin. He was an ER doctor. He likes to let everybody know that, and whenever he gets the opportunity, and that he used to go to the cabin in the morning, and he liked being in the Sierra National Forest. I'm sure all of that's true, but he's seen the light with the range of light proposal, and knows that the Sierra National Forest, the way it's being currently run and used, is not sustainable, and all of us dummies are going to ruin the forest. And he's been so motivated by Deanna Wolf's work, he's gone to his fellow Democratic state legislators in Sacramento and has gotten 52 members of the state legislature to sign on to this letter that's going to go to the president about making the monument. And that was about all he had to say. I'm going to go back to Deanna Wolf because I forgot one very important part of this. High on the list, right under no OHV and no logging, she literally had the bullet point on her description that was shared on the screen that said, "Cowboys, no cows." So she's done with cattle grazing on the High Sierra permits that some of our local families have been doing for 100 years. The Toppings, the McDougals, some of these great families that have long been stewards of the land up there while also growing, growing the wonderful beef that we all enjoy and depend on. And so cows are out with the National Monument. No more cows. And then condescendingly said, but we do need cowboys because cowboys know how to work the land. And so you cowboys out there, we need you to help us cover up all these fire roads with trees. Literally said that. And laughed as she said it. And so there's that. Okay, I'm going to go over to the comments here in a second. Can I pan through those? Yeah, like I said, I'm sorry if you're just getting on here. I don't point the camera this this way. I'm holding my phone, but I'm learning how to use this new way of doing it for me. I'm looking at my notes. Oh, Ron Good got on. He's I think he's a leader in the Mono tribe, the Mono Indian tribe. And Ron got on for what seemed like an eternity as well. The basic, and they are in support of the national monument. The Mono Indian tribe is in favor of this becoming a national monument. Ron's leaking disgust for the Sierra National Forest and its managers was apparent in the phone call. He made that pretty clear. He did mention that in this area, our Representative McClintock, Congressman McClintock, knows about this project and has said publicly and privately that he would not support it and not vote for it should it come to the House for a vote. And then on the call said that McClintock was quote unquote worthless, which everybody on the call, the people that were there, the doctors and the politicians and Deanna Wolf, all laughed out loud openly, just assuming all of us were cool with that comment, and that he has to go. What the Native Americans, what the Indians want to do up there is they want to practice cultural burning. Okay, so the Forest Service has been against this, from what I can tell. This is just what I gathered at this webinar. But there are cultural and spiritually significant reasons why the tribes of California want to burn and do ceremonial burns, cultural burns as they call them, very similar to what they used to do in the past. And it's how they protected their lands and ensured growth and low intensity fire on the ground late in the fall when conditions are not really good for fire spread. We know this, right? We know that the Indians in Yosemite, the Owanichi, used to set the ground on fire and let it crawl and let it burn, and it was good. It was good fire. And the local tribes up and down California continue to do this, but they do it with resistance from the Forest Service, according to Ron Good. And that should this proposal go through for a national monument, that the national monument being administered by the National Park Service would be much more lenient to letting small groups of people light fires in the forest for ceremonial purposes. I'm not taking anything away from the native tribes for wanting to do that. I think that's pretty cool. I get why they're doing it, and it's part of their heritage and it's part of their culture. And who am I to say that's right or wrong? Ron did say that they have a 0% track record of having escaped fires in these situations. They've never had one fire get away from them. He did point out that when the National Forest Service has helped them do or has done prescribed burns that are not have anything to do with Native American culture, that they don't have as great a track record, that fires have escaped the Forest Service and CAL FIRE at times. So he was quick to point that out. The call wrapped up. I thought this was funny, and those that were on the call are going to have a good time with this. As the call wrapped up, this little helper bee that was on the call too, helping like an assistant to Deanna, as they were saying goodbye, the assistant speaks up and goes, Deanna, there's quite a few people with their hand raised. You know, if you're on one of these webinars, you can click the hand raise button. And she said, there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of people who want to ask questions. And if you could have seen the look on this woman's face, Deanna's face, when she got that pointed out to her, she stuttered and stammered like Kamala Harris at a town hall meeting. And she did not know what to do with that. And she goes, well, I don't think we can take any calls right now. We're trying to figure it out. Oh, we don't know. She stammered around and ultimately said, well, we're not going to take any questions right now. We'll do another one of these where they can take questions. But then said they can't take questions on great scale because of the limitations of how Zoom works, which is ridiculous. So it was a one-way discussion. I really, I don't think Deanna Wolf realizes what's about to come her way right now. Because the very last thing she said on the phone call was, we can't take questions right now. But please, everybody out there listening, please share my email address, and please send your concerns or questions via email to me directly. I'm going to put this up on the screen later, but right now, if you're watching and want to write it down, her email is director@unitetheparks.org, O-R-G. director@unitetheparks.org. And so I would imagine she's going to hear or get a few emails from some of us that aren't necessarily thrilled with this development. You know, I do believe that national monuments, there's a place for them. And I believe that, and I've visited them, I've shot TV shows in them, I've admired them all over the country. And this isn't about, well, I don't want one in my backyard. It's not that. It's where this proposed monument would be. As I said earlier on another post, this isn't a remote red rock section of the Utah desert. This isn't a remote corner of the Pacific Northwest in a old growth rainforest. This is a heavily populated, heavily used treasure, in my opinion, the Sierra National Forest. Like a lot of you, we've grown up here. We've watched it through good times and bad. We've watched it go through cycles. And to me, it is a good balance of everything that we all need, and including the forest. I mean, you can go up Bayshore Road and take the Sierra Vista Scenic Byway drive. Well, you can take the drive once they finish the bridge that's been burned down for 4 years, almost 5 years. But you can still get around that if you have a four-wheel drive. But my point is, there's balance between the humans, between the animals, between the forest, between the fish. We've figured it out. And because one woman from the Bay Area, who's a former national park and ranger and yoga instructor, had an experience where she talked about it. She went to climb up to Jackass Lake, and she was so bummed out by what the creek fire had done in that region that set her off. And she thought, well, that creek fire would have never happened had we never been in here logging. And it's just, it comes down to, it's kind of like with Chad Hansen, because I asked Chad Hansen when I was with him for a whole day, I said, man, what was the trigger for you that led you on this crusade to do what I think and a lot of other people think is insane? With all due respect, like what led you to this? And it was, the stories are similar, because this Deanna Wolf, she had that one experience and she just kind of snapped on it. And she's been, working on this arguably before the creek fire. This is an idea that she had it was born before the creek fire. But the creek, as she pointed out, the creek fire, the aftermath of creek fire really set her off. And so we've got these people that they just get an idea, and God bless them for the motivation and the gumption and the hard work. I'm not saying she didn't put a lot of effort into this, but the rationale behind it and the lack of understanding of what's really going on the ground up there was striking to me as she was explaining the why she was doing this. And that's what we're stuck with. And, we're seeing it right now in the political divide in this country. I took a crack at Kamala Harris a minute ago. And that's where we're at right now. We're just in this divide that we won't really listen to the other side no matter what. And in this situation, they've got a lot of momentum going in their direction here. So this can be done by presidential proclamation. I have calls into Nathan Magzig, Jim Patterson. I'd love to hear what Bobby McCullough thinks. I'd love to hear what Nathan thinks about this. I know they're gonna, this thing wasn't high on everybody's radar screen, and now it's probably going to be glowing pretty bright on everybody's radar screen, as it should. I don't know. There was nothing in the call that said, hey man, we're hoping Biden does this right before he leaves office. We didn't get that. We don't know what behind the scenes deals are going on to make this happen. It may not be anything. It may be nothing. It may never get approved or pushed, or we don't know. But from this point on, we need to be plugged in, and we need to be aware of what is about or potentially could happen. And I think the next smartest thing to do is probably get a letter to your congressman, Tom McClintock, get letters out, emails, whatever, text, however you communicate to our supervisors in both counties, Fresno, Madera, and let's get the discussion going. Because if they, I was going back to say why this one is not a great idea for me as far as a national monument is we already have such well established and heavy use of the forest in ways that have stabilized. I mean, we're not, and the National Forest Service already did a little bit of a land grab from we the people back in the early 2000s, when they shut a lot. Oh, Lulu's barking at the Amazon guy. Lulu, it's just Amazon guy. They did a little bit of a land grab when they fooled us, man. They said, come on down, I remember this, come on down to the Oakhurst Community Center. They had a huge map of all the OHV roads, and they said, hey, draw on this map where you guys like to ride. And we all went, yeah, cool, and we all rode on there. We showed roads that the Forest Service didn't even know they had. And then what they do, they went and shut all those roads down and changed the landscape pretty dramatically of what those roads were. So we're kind of in that situation again. Be aware of it. I'm going to go through some questions right now. Most of these are kind of comments. And I'm just panning through. Just bear with me here. Yeah, I'm reading some of your comments. Yeah, they're all, I mean, a lot of us are sort of on the same page here. There's John Miles. I was talking to him earlier. Mark Berticelli. Did the fire guy ever spend any time on a crew and actually look? No, Mark, of course not, man. You know the answer to that. But I know you had to ask it. Yeah, so Bryce Anderson. I know Bryce has been getting on the Facebook page the last couple of days saying that somehow Madera and Fresno counties have jurisdiction to say no on this. I don't know personally. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that. I'll look into that. I'm assuming what you mean is that the counties can override a federal decree by the president, and so I'd be surprised by that. But maybe you're right. Maybe there's some way of doing that. I'm looking through more of these comments here. If they manage the forest, Tammy writes, if they manage the forest in the first place, you wouldn't have the forest burn up. There's obviously, I agree with that to a large degree. Thank you for your level-headed point of view. I don't know how level-headed I was. I'm pretty pissed off right now. I try to be level-headed, but I don't think I was. That wasn't the best version of Jeff being level-headed today. Yeah, I think, I think it might be kind of a good idea to, I think there's going to be a need for people, and I'm getting that from just looking at these messages. I think we all need to get together. I think we all need to get together in one place and have some political leaders there, have our supervisors there. I would love the Forest Service to chime in. I'd love to know where Dean Gould stands on this. I'd love to know where some other Forest Service employees stand on this. They're not going to talk publicly about it, but I'd like to know. You know who you are. You're my Forest Service employee friends. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Do you become National Park Service employees then? Does your job go away? I'd be asking that. But I think if we all got together, and we've been talking about doing a big Talk of the Hill meet and greet anyway, where we just all get together and just get to shake each other's hands and meet each other face to face. So many of you, I would love to get to meet face to face, and I know Jill would too. We've had this really cool community grow from the Creek Fire, and I don't know, maybe this is something that we all unify behind. And you know what? There might be people on this Talk of the Hill page that love the idea of a Range of Light National Monument. And if you're out there, let's hear from you. I mean, you're not going to get kicked off the page because I don't agree with you. You get kicked off the page if you're an ass and you insult my wife. That'll get you kicked off the page. But if you keep it cool, we'll get along just fine. But yeah, let's hear what you think. If you think this is a good idea, I think it's important discussion to have. Maybe there's aspects of this that, in my excitement and disappointment right now, I'm not thinking through. That I always try to give myself that. Sometimes it's good to let things simmer down a little bit before you really make decisions on it. But I wanted to get on with you guys right after this, because it was top of mind, and I know a lot of people are wondering about this. So I'll continue. I'm going to jump off because I got to get back to work, but I appreciate all of you. Jill and I both do, and we love this community. And this one is pretty crazy. We haven't really faced something like this before. I mean, fire was bad, but the fire wasn't something we could reason with. It had a mind of its own. It did its thing, and we had to just deal with it. There, you know, I try to think about what it would look like if this actually went through. Like if this actually becomes a national monument and the road signs are posted, I mean, and you're not able to take your side-by-side up to go to your cabin in the wintertime. Those families that have for 100 years, fifth generations, have been going up to Jackass Meadow or Bayshore Meadows to green feed their cattle in the summer. For that to be done breaks my heart, to be honest with you. So it'll be interesting to see where this all goes. Yeah, Chris Cochran, I just read your comment right here. Where would 2.7 million people stay? Well, they'd stay in Fresno. They'd stay in Oakhurst, Coarsegold. Probably have to build more stuff. Again, the plan, you've got 4.5 million people coming to Yosemite every year right now. That might be even closer to 5 million. And what part of the plan is for this park is to, or for this national monument, is to make something so cool. It's cool as it is right now, but they want to draw attention to it by turning it into a national monument and then directing 2.7 million people up Bayshore Road. Basically, that's what they're talking about. Doesn't sound like a great idea. It doesn't sound like that's even possible. But to people like Deanna Wolf here, I just don't know how far. I just don't know what their long view is of all of this. So, okay, guys, I'm gonna jump off. We'll read comments. Please keep this topic alive. Share the hell out of this video because the algorithm, Facebook algorithm, will bury it. Not many people will see it organically, but if you share it, you overcome the algorithm a little bit. And so do all that, and we'll just keep on fighting the good fight here. Try to be respectful as much as you can. If we're going to get into debates, it's easy to devolve into name calling. I'm guilty of it just as much as anybody. But let's try to keep cool heads and talk through it as much as we can. Okie doke. Cool. Thanks you guys for putting up with me for 47 minutes. Ugh. I'm going to end the video now and get back to work, and we'll talk to you guys soon. We'll also put up websites, email addresses, all the pertinent stuff you guys need. All right. Talk to you guys soon.